So this is the second part of episode 10, season 3. Let's jump right into it, because I'm sure I'm gonna ramble quite a bit. I really wish we'd been able to see more of David and Laura's apartment, because even just from the little things that we get around David's room, there's just so much life. There's so much personality injected into it. And speaking of life, I mentioned this before, but all of the colors in this clip are just so warm and inviting. The light that's streaming in, you can feel the warmth in it. There's plants everywhere, and whether they're real or fake, I think they still emanate this feeling of liveliness. I really love that. I think it's perfect for the tone that this clip and the previous clip are trying to create. Just a lot of love and comfort and safety. And I'm not sure if this was intentional or if they just loved the symmetry, because I do. But this little shot of them with their feet kind of intertwined reminds me of the quote from Only Lovers Left Alive. When you separate an entwined particle and move both parts away from the other, even at opposite ends of the universe, if you alter or affect one, the other will be identically altered or affected. I think that's such a beautiful quote. It's a quote that everyone uses pretty much when they're talking about the movie. I really should watch that, huh? I don't know, it reminds me of it. And as well as any time that they hold hands and their fingers are intertwined, which we saw in the previous clip, we're gonna see in the next clip as well. Just all of that reminds me of that quote, which I think is really fitting for David and Matteo. And I want to take a moment to look back at all of the moments in which we've seen Matteo wake up in a bed throughout this season and compare it to this one, because there's some really key differences that just make my heart super warm. So let's start with the first one, which is in episode 1, clip 2. Matteo wakes up in bed next to Jonas, and he kind of tries to be physically affectionate with him. He tries to touch his hand and his hair, but he's moving very carefully. He's really trying not to wake Jonas up, because how the fuck is he gonna explain the fact that he's playing with his best friend's hair when he's trying to be all straight and shit, right? You can really see that longing for physical affection immediately. This is the second clip of the entire season, and we already get the sense immediately that Matteo really likes to be close to people. And then the next scene where we see him wake up is the first clip of episode 4, which is importantly right after the clip in which Matteo and David have their almost kiss. And we see Matteo waking up with his arm wrapped around a body pillow, pretty much. I don't know if it's one pillow or if he's made a body out of separate pillows. If he did that, that is so sad. But either way, he wanted to snuggle with something. He wanted to cuddle something. He wanted to hold on to something while he was sleeping. The camera makes sure to focus on the fact that his arm is wrapped around that pillow. And I said it was important that this is right after the almost kiss, because I feel like this brings up more feelings of longing. Matteo wants to be physically intimate with people. And almost kissing David definitely brings that back up in his mind. It brings it to the forefront. The next time we see him wake up is episode 5, clip 2. David leaves before Matteo wakes up. So once again, Matteo is left with just this outstretched arm on the bed, but there's no one next to him. He has the drawing of David, so he's not completely alone, but there is no physical presence in the bed with him, and his arm, the camera focuses once again on his arm being outstretched on the side of the bed that I assume David was on before he left. And then the last time that we see him wake up is in the first clip of episode 8, which was another time in which Matteo and David spent the night together, but it was importantly different from this one, because when Matteo wakes up, David is not in the bed with him. He's still in the room, which is definitely better from the episode 5 one, but he leaves the bed. So once again, we see, and the camera focuses on Matteo's hand kind of clutching under his pillow. So you can probably assume what I'm gonna be talking about, but in each of these scenes, the camera makes sure that we see Matteo's arm/hand and how it is outstretched, or how it is like trying to hold something or someone. There is this intense feeling of longing in all of these clips. And now we have this, which is so different in so many heartwarming ways. It is the first and only time that we see Matteo wake up next to someone, and he can be unabashedly affectionate with them. He doesn't have to censor his movements or his thoughts, and he doesn't because he wakes David up. And I think that's such a sweet difference from that very first moment with Jonas. That is the only other time that we saw Matteo waking up in the bed with someone, but obviously he had to be very careful. He couldn't wake Jonas up. But here, Matteo does the exact opposite of that. I know like a lot of people just read this as like Matteo being a little shit, and he is being a little shit. For sure, absolutely. But I really love looking at this moment as a way for Matteo to separate himself from that memory back in episode 1. He actively tries to make this situation here different from that one back in episode 1. He's taking advantage of the fact that he has now been open not only with himself, but with David. And he doesn't have to hide who he loves anymore. So he's like, you know what? Last time I couldn't wake Jonas up. I had to be like super delicate about everything. But now I am going to be a little bitch and wake my boyfriend up because I can, right? He can. And there's such a delight in that. The fact that he can just be playful and not have to worry about what that means, you know? If Jonas is going to be like, oh shit, are you gay? Like, no, it doesn't matter. Matteo can just be himself and be free. And then going along with the fact that he intentionally wakes David up, he also intentionally pulls David's hair, which is the other thing that Matteo couldn't do with Jonas in that scene in episode 1. He tried to kind of like caress his curls a little bit, but he couldn't. And now he, once again, is a little shit and takes full advantage of the fact that he doesn't have to hide, and he pulls David's hair. And I love it. I love that you can read like all of that as just pure fun, and it is pure fun. But you can also go deeper with it. You can connect that freedom to how trapped Matteo was in the beginning of this season. He doesn't have to censor himself. He doesn't have to walk on eggshells. He is allowed to be just completely present in this scene. And he takes advantage of that, and he just lets himself be. And he realizes it too. He says, like, this is so good. Like, everything is good right now. He knows that this is probably the most peaceful moment he's had in a while, and he's just letting himself bask in it. And I think this is much needed right after episodes 8 and 9. And another thing that is much needed is David being able to speak more about his experiences and about his past. I really, really love that they included this and that they let Matteo ask some of the questions that he probably should have asked in episode 8. And also that David gets to speak about them in this completely private and safe environment. And I just, oh God, I love it. I'm just gonna say I love it so many times. I know I am. I don't want this to end. I really don't. Shit. I put off filming this for like 2 weeks because I didn't want this to end. And now here we are. I still don't want it to end. And I love all the little details with their hands as well. You could just watch this entire scene and be entertained by their fingers this entire time because they're always like moving, they're always doing something. They're always like taking opportunities to like draw circles on each other's skin and to tap on each other's skin, just anything. They really love physical affection. Both of them do. And you can see it through their hands throughout this scene. And I also want to talk about Matteo's lack of eye contact during this. And I've said before that I'm not going to go in depth about the autistic Matteo headcanon. I will absolutely relink the master post in the description, and I highly, highly, highly recommend reading it. It is absolutely fascinating and brilliant, and I can't even put into words how much I appreciate the fact that it exists. So please just like read it for yourself if you're interested in that. But I really do think that that is a super valid explanation for Matteo's kind of atypical behavior in this scene. While David is talking about his experiences, which is something pretty serious, that you should make eye contact with someone when they're talking about something so serious, Matteo really doesn't. There's a lot of times when you can't really see where he's looking because of the camera angle, but right here you can see that Matteo is clearly not looking at David at all. He's looking completely away from him. He's looking at the ceiling. There's a lot of times throughout the rest of this conversation where he looks like he's just kind of looking down, like at their bodies or at the other side of the room. And meanwhile, David is usually looking at Matteo while he's talking throughout this conversation. You can see kind of the more normative reaction in David and this more atypical reaction and behavior with Matteo. And another part of this is that Matteo takes a kind of a long time to react to a couple of the things that David says. Specifically, when David says that he Googled his symptoms, it takes Matteo like a full 5 seconds to even start to process what that means. David is already laughing by the time that Matteo even kind of starts to show on his face that he understands what David just said. And I definitely think you could explain this by Matteo just being tired and groggy and also like ultra relaxed, which makes him kind of move slowly and react slowly. I think that's definitely like an explanation. If you're not into like the whole autistic Matteo headcanon, that's totally fine. But I'm just offering like another explanation that maybe you haven't heard before, and once again, totally recommend checking out the link in the description because it does talk about this scene in more detail. But whether you subscribe to the headcanon or not, I want to underline the fact that this isn't rude. Matteo not making eye contact with David, to me, reads as even more evidence for the fact that Matteo is just being himself here, and it does not bother David. I want to make that clear too. You can see that it doesn't bother David. David's just like chilling, and he's telling his story, and he's sharing his thoughts, and he never looks even slightly frustrated or confused as to why Matteo is acting the way he is. Whether you think it's because he's neurodivergent or that he's just tired, whatever, that, you know, we can debate about that. But I think the important thing is the fact that David doesn't mind, you know? He doesn't mind at all. Like, this is Matteo, and David loves Matteo. This really just highlights how deeply and effortlessly they understand each other, and they always have. And then here we have more mirroring with David kind of pursing his lips to the side and then Matteo immediately imitating that right afterwards. And then as we go throughout this conversation, I think it's important to note that Matteo is being a really good listener here. And I think this goes even further to say that, you know, his lack of eye contact is not rude, and it doesn't mean that he isn't invested in this conversation. And I think you can see that, and it's clear because of how good of a listener he's being right now. He's being an active listener. He's giving David plenty of time to speak. He's not asking like leading questions or anything like that. All of the questions are very like open-ended. He also shows that he has done some research, which is great. He's being supportive, not being like demanding or anything. It's such a great conversation. And I think Matteo really shows that he's in this. He's being super supportive, and just because he's not making eye contact doesn't mean he's not. And then this is my favorite part of this conversation, when Matteo asks, do you want to get anything done? And I love this question. I love the word choice of this question because it's framed completely with the emphasis on David's agency. There are a lot of ways that someone could ask this question. One very simple one that might not seem very different from the question Matteo asks is, are you going to get anything done? That's another thing that Matteo could have said. He could have phrased it in that way, but he doesn't. He says, do you want to get anything done? And it might seem like the wording differences between those two versions are like very minute and they don't really matter, But the fact that they specifically worded it in this way, with the clear emphasis on David's choice, is just super important. And I think it shows a lot of care that was taken in the dialogue here. The version of this question that Matteo asks is not presumptuous. It doesn't urge or expect David to answer either way. It doesn't, show that Matteo has like an opinion on it. It's really focused completely on David, as it should be, and I love it. And I also love the framing of this. So right before Matteo asks the question, we see David kind of trace his finger like across Matteo's chest and down his waist, and you can see he's kind of like admiring it. And I think that's probably what prompts Matteo, maybe not, but it could have been what prompted Matteo to ask the question. And then throughout David's answer, we get this very tight shot of David laying on Matteo's chest as he talks about wanting to get top surgery. And I love that we're on David this entire time. We don't cut back up to Matteo. The camera really gives David room to speak here. Not literally, because it is a very close shot, but the editing of it, I should say, gives David room to think and to breathe. And I think it's just shot in a very respectful way for David and Lucas. And I think this very intimate shot is a perfect, albeit on the nose, way to symbolize how David is like literally bearing his soul here. He's sharing things that are super personal and that he probably never thought he would have the strength to share with anyone, or that he would trust anyone to share this with, besides maybe Laura. And it's just so great how the comfort here and the trust here is palpable. Throughout this entire clip, there's always this tone of protection and support and just pure love between the two of them. There is no real space between them anymore, physically and emotionally, and because of that, there is little to no space between the camera and them. And then "you're good the way you are." I am in no position to touch on like the full extent of how amazing that line is, but I love just how simple yet weighty it is. And I feel like that's a theme with Matteo. I think a lot of his quotes have almost this like childlike simplicity and wisdom to them. Matteo doesn't say that much, but when he wants to, he can really like hit home. And oh man, I would give the world to hear him talk again. I really would. I really do think that Matteo is like so emotionally intelligent, but he doesn't flaunt it at all. Maybe he doesn't even know it himself, but quotes like that really show just how much he gets people, but especially David. I think he would be great as like a psychologist, especially like a child psychologist. I can imagine Matteo being really good with kids. No one cares. I'm just gonna go on a rant about how much I wish we knew what Matteo was doing with his life. That's my headcanon. Dude, I love Laura so much. It really makes me wish that she could have had a bigger part in this season. She is honestly like so charismatic. I don't know the actress's name who plays her, but I love her. I would die for her, truly. I really wish the relationship between her and Matteo could have gotten more development. A little side rant, but could you imagine if like any of the Druck seasons could have been as long as the OG season 2? They could have fit in every missing plot thread that I've ranted about, and then some, with how fucking long season 2 of the original is. Like, I'm not bitter. No, I'm not. I would never. And I also love how there's just as much life here as there was in David's room. Like, there are plants everywhere, there's like fresh herbs and stuff, there's still so much light pouring in, there's a home-cooked meal. This entire clip is just so warm and cozy and loving. I love how Laura acts in this little exchange, because it starts off like that nah is fucking scary. Her face and her tone when she says that is terrifying. I would not want to be on her bad side. But then she immediately kind of softens and brings him in for a hug, and then switches back over to protective sister mode and is like, don't you dare fucking do that again. And then she softens again. And I love it. There's so much personality in that one little exchange, and you can really tell that Laura is a tough love kind of big sister, right? She doesn't take any shit, but she's also like the best. So this clip not only shows how comfortable David and Matteo are with one another and how relaxed and intimate they are at this point in their relationship, but it also serves to show how quickly Matteo is being integrated into this dynamic. David invites him to the table, he eats the shakshuka with David and Laura, and as part of like this overarching food metaphor that I've kind of been throwing in at certain points during this season, Matteo is very quickly being accepted as a part of the Schreibner family, and I think that's so sweet. When he first enters this scene, he catches Laura in a bit of like an embarrassing, vulnerable moment. They laugh it off together, and then they share this look that's like, hey, I love your brother, and Laura's like, hey, I love him too. And there's already this like unspoken bond between them as well, because they both love David a lot and they both want to protect him and support him through everything, right? So yeah, Matteo gets to eat the food with them. He accepts it. He's like, nah, I don't want the sandwiches. I want to have some shakshuka. He's also wearing David's sweater, and David is wearing his hoodie. So that is them, once again, having this balance, being connected with one another, as well as Matteo also being a part of this household, being a part of this family unit. And it's so lovely.